Welcome to My Home HQ podcast with Ray Fletcher. Leading the way in buying and selling homes, knowing the current housing market, updating your home without an extensive remodel, or how to stage your home for the perfect sale and more. Portland, Oregon real estate agent Ray Fletcher will bring his 20-plus years experience of real estate, home ownership, and selling homes to you in his bi-monthly podcast. This podcast will be your home headquarters for strategies to achieve success in your real estate investments. Now your host of the podcast, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to My Home HQ podcast with Ray Fletcher, who is our resident home and real estate expert in Portland, Oregon. And Realtor Ray is what I like to call him, but Ray Fletcher is here today to chat with me about all things real estate, and I'm your host, Terry Fletcher. So, hi, Ray. How's your month going so far?
Not too bad. How are you?
I'm good. I know you recently came back from a cruise. How was that?
It was good. It was actually really good. It was
good.
Yeah.
How was your weather?
Well, we did a 7-day cruise. The first 5 days were pretty great, but then the last two, coming back from Puerto Vallarta, I think it is the farthest one. It was a little cold and breezy, but it was still good.
Yeah. And remember, folks, I know we have some East Coast listeners out there. For us, cold is, anything that's under 50. So I know you feel bad for us, but that's kind of where we're coming from.
Yep. Very true.
Well, let's take a look and talk about today. Our topic is going to be homeowners associations, so HOAs. We really want to look at what it includes, how much it is, what it's worth, and I really know your first words to me is going to be, well, it depends. It depends where you are.
Yep.
So kind of let's get started with this. An HOA, what is it for, first of all?
So a homeowners association is basically to protect in a nutshell, it's to protect the values of the property. You move into a neighborhood, you'd like to keep it to where you pull in, you don't see a bunch of cars on jacks, you don't see a bright purple or some other pink home, and it just kind of keeps a little bit of unity throughout that subdivision.
Okay, so you made a point there as far as the color of the home. So
yeah,
they basically, this is a body of people, I guess, that determine house color for external paint. So
what it is you move into a subdivision, the board of the HOA is typically the neighbors. Okay. Interestingly enough, our sister-in-law is on the board of the HOA. She does the accounting, and it's kind of interesting. Most people, when they hear HOAs, they're like, oh, I don't want one of those, or I don't want to be a part of it. She loves it. So she gets to see everybody's plans and all of their what people are wanting to do, and then it has to be approved. Prior to that, there's an HOA company that is basically contracted by the builder to put the guidelines and all the CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions in place. They're pretty broad. It's just everything for the most part has to be voted on before you can get it approved.
So my husband was on the board of when we had a different house years ago. And he said a lot of times, like you said, it's neighbors, but it's usually like the older, did I say older neighbors that are kind of, retired and they don't have a lot else to do. And so they're very, I don't know if the word's conservative, but just very picky and nitpicky about things, about what they allow. Like you said, paint color, you wouldn't see a purple house. Things have to look uniform. But what I noticed, and you mentioned CR&Rs, so that's, what's that acronym again?
CC&Rs.
CC&Rs.
Covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
So basically what you're allowed to do if you want to live in that space.
Well, yeah, it's once you get into the space, and you want to do some improvements. There's fence guidelines, like how far can the fence be in front of the house? Because some fences, they only allow it to be on the side of the house. You can't even put it in front. As far as your backyard, can you see it from the front? Like if you're going to do a covered patio, can you see it from the front of the house? And then some of the nitpicky ones could be, I want a satellite dish. Well, the placement of that can't be viewed from the street.
Wow. So it's funny because
type
in
thing.
the condo complex I lived in before we moved back into a single family home, that was a big thing for them because I
Yeah.
wanted DirecTV, and apparently I was the only one that wanted DirecTV in this whole subdivision.
Yep.
And it was on a golf course, as you know. And they gave me a really hard time. I actually had to go to the board to get it approved because it had to be at a certain place on the roof. It couldn't be, and it had to be painted the same color as the building.
Correct. So you've had your in with an HOA board and of directors, and you probably had to pull some teeth and be frustrated. It's like, it's not that
Did.
hard here.
Yeah, the one thing
So
I was surprised is sometimes as we're talking about this, and I think to our listeners, it's not just about paint color, as far as externally, and it's not just about the fencing, even though those are important things because those are expensive things. But what I read in the CCNR, and again, if it's a condo complex, if you're not in a subdivision, I found out that you can't have barbecues in a certain sided area. You can't have fire pits. I mean, oh my goodness.
yes, and on another note, if you go one step further and you live in what's considered a historical district, so let's say all the homes in your neighborhood are like the 1800s or early 1900s, you're now designated as a historical home. You get a
Yeah.
little plaque on the front, but now the restrictions with the city outweigh you. It's not even an HOA now. Now it's your rules. So let's say you want to replace a window, you got to get that approved by the city.
Oh, wow. So
So
certain
if
districts and areas. Okay.
yeah, and to make sure your window is still wood framed, even though you're trying to upgrade to vinyl windows that are just much more efficient. So you're going to spend more money. So there's rules everywhere, and some people that are like, I don't want HOAs. It's like, even if you don't have HOAs, you're still going to have rules on your property,
Well, we
and
found
that's
that out
something that
when
most
we
people don't know.
we
Yeah,
found that out when we put in a pool. So we don't
yeah,
have
yeah,
HOAs here because these homes, like you said, have been around since the early 1960s. And we actually are in one of the model homes from this 1968. We've had it
yeah.
remodeled, everyone, but it was a model home at some point, which surprises me with carpet in the bathrooms. But we've since stripped it down and everything. But what I did notice is that the city of Riverside, where I'm in, they have some really specific, oh my gosh, things. So one of the things, Ray mentioned about fencing, our fencing was 3 inches apart in the slats. We had to make it where it's an inch and a half, so kids can't get in the backyard if you have a pool. Things like that. We had to
Yep.
replace all of it. I mean, just the inches. The fence had to have automatic shut, so when you swing it, it clicks automatically where you don't have to manually shut it. I mean, just it's crazy when I see things like that. One of the things that I was going to ask you too is when somebody is out searching for a home, and let's say it's either a subdivision, which is a tract home, everyone, or a single family home, or even a condo complex, and actually even a rental property that they're trying to invest in. We see these on some of those, beachfront home buying shows. I've noticed that sometimes it seems like the HOAs can be more expensive than the mortgage payment. Have you seen that?
Well, kind of. HOAs can definitely be really high. If you get into condos, that's where you're going to see HOAs that are going to be through the roof because now it's based on square footage. So if you live in a downtown high rise and you have 2,000 square feet, which is a huge place, your HOAs could be 2,500 a month
Oh my
because
goodness.
because it's your footprint that you're dealing with. Now, on a side note, your HOAs on that type of scenario cover the utilities. You might get electric, water, sewer, trash. Most likely, what you are going to get is water, sewer, and trash, and that's kind of a standard. And then you've got the building maintenance, and then the property management that's managing that HOA, the concierge that's opening the door, the 24/7. Somebody's at a front desk has to be paid. So that's where the HOAs kind of go through the roof, and you just have to look at what's the lifestyle I'm trying to accomplish here. If your house is paid for, your HOAs are 2,500 a month. If you have an HOA that high, most likely your taxes on that place are going to be 15,000 a year.
Right.
So you're going to have a pretty hefty payment. Well, again, hefty is a relative term, and what people make and what they want their lifestyle to be. It's a pretty low maintenance. You're basically living in a really, really nice hotel, You don't have to ever mow a lawn. You're never even going to have to wash your exterior windows. That's just all going to be done for you.
All for you. So amenities aren't just having a pool,
Yeah.
community pool or things like that. It's also maintenance that can be
Yeah.
included in HOAs. Okay.
Maintenance and utilities.
Well, and I know, for example, here, this was something I thought was very interesting. So, you know how some people on the curb, it's actually, to me, it's very 70s, 80s, but you have your house number on your curb.
Yeah.
Well, some people don't have that, I guess, or some neighborhoods don't require it. Well, they require it here, but the city does it, and they don't even let the homeowner do it. But I've noticed that some HOAs say, no, 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 you have to do that.
Yes. And yeah, like the city will just run up, stencil it on, paint it, and move on. And they probably update them every 5 to 10 years.
Right.
Some HOAs will be like, no, it has to be visible on this pillar, and that's the rule. So yeah, for sure. It can be very picky. Very few HOAs, from my experience, say no to a lot of things, because most people, when they're in the neighborhood, want the neighborhood to kind of stay as nice as possible, because everybody wants their values to be. And if they don't, then they're not even in that. They're not even looking in that neighborhood anyways.
Right. Now, there's some things that come up with HOAs, and this is something I'm sure you probably caution your clients and anybody out there looking to buy a single family home to read and figure out what they actually do cover. Because, for example, I know when we had the condo, it was a detached garage, and we had. I don't want to call it a hurricane in California, but we had a really bad storm, and a tree fell on it and broke the garage door, and
Yeah.
they wanted to just fix it instead of replace it. And it looked like crap. It looked
Right.
terrible. And then and then a friend of mine who lives in a condo, there was leaking from the underground garage that they had that leaked into his condo, and they said he had to pay for it because it was his condo and it was inside. And he's like, yeah, but it's part of the property. And it was this big lawsuit that they had to go through to finally figure out who was going to actually pay for it. But then I know I had one where they tried to get it when I was renting before I was buying again, where the gardeners backed into our garage and broke the door.
Right.
And they're like, you have to go through your renter's insurance. I'm like, why? It's your gardeners that backed
Yeah.
into my garage. And finally they paid for it. But, you don't want to fold, but you also want to make sure you know what is covered, right? And what isn't.
Correct. And you really want to have yourself or your agent. I mean, you want both. Your agent should be scanning over these things just to make sure that nothing is out of the ordinary. As far as the things that you've mentioned, traditionally, HOAs and condos only cover the exterior, everything inside. Like if your toilet or shower backs up, that's on you. And that's where, if you own the condo, that's where your homeowner's insurance does come into play. Now, if it was me and I was in the situation and my neighbor child or themselves flooded my house because they just were playing in the tub, well, yeah, I'm not going to pay. I would be very frustrated to have to pay my $3,000 deductible to have my whole ceiling replaced in my condo. So I would be going after them as well. As far as the gardeners backing into a garage, I mean, that is something that they should have stopped, put a note, and their insurance should have covered it. So those are basic things that I agree they should have been covered, not by the homeowner, but by the incident. But yeah, you've got to check, you got to make sure that, and then decipher, and then really look at the differences between, is it an HOA or is it a city? Let's say you move into this great neighborhood and you're like, I'm tired of raking leaves, and you've got this beautiful maple tree in front of your house. Well, most likely you're not allowed to cut that down based on the city, because when new construction gets put in, they are required to put in X amount of trees per home. I mean, it's a requirement. And so you've got to even look further than that to see what the other requirements are. And then parking is another thing that the city, street parking, maybe the HOA doesn't care, but the city's like, no, you can't park there longer than 48 hours. So it's even more involved if we're not just talking about HOA rules, but we're talking about homeowner rules.
Oh, right, right. Well, here's something funny. So, Tom's my nephew. he owns a property management association, which is the same thing, the
Yeah.
homeowner association. And he says he gets a weekly call from a particular neighbor, homeowner,
Yeah.
because her flowers won't grow, and she wants
Oh
them to
man.
fix it.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not thinking that was a profitable move, but he goes, "Oh my
Right.
gosh." He says, "You should hear some of the things." He said she was mad because she didn't like the Christmas lights the neighbor puts up, and she goes to bed at 7:30 at night and they don't turn off until 9, and so she wants them fined. And I mean, it's really a complaint board too. It's kind of funny when you hear
Yes,
some of the stories.
that is correct. And people will overuse it. If you leave your garbage cans out too long, someone's calling somebody. I think once again, if you know the rules and if you know what the rules are, it's easy to follow them. When you're just not thinking about it, and then you get told on, that's where it becomes a problem. So it's
Yeah.
like, what are we doing here?
What are we doing? Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I noticed that on a couple of the fixer-upper things that I watch on TV, I notice when they get stalled, it's usually because the homeowner association got a call from somebody, a neighbor going, they're too loud, or they put nails in the street, or there's just too much construction. So definitely to the listeners, watch out for that as well.
Yes. Very, very true.
So moving on to a different subject, which actually kind of goes along with this when it comes to cost and knowing the rules and everything. I noticed in your monthly newsletter, which again, I love getting your monthly newsletter through email. So for everyone out there, you can sign up for Ray's monthly newsletter and get in touch with him as well. And we'll, at the end, Ray, you can say how to do that.
Yep.
But no one wants to pay too much for a house. And I know that can be very frustrating to everyone, especially with the market the way it is right now. But if home values fall too much, you can also end up underwater and, owing more on your mortgage than your home is actually worth.
Right.
But we don't want people to worry about that because, again, real estate is a good investment. But I noticed you had a really great article that said the 4 signs a property is priced too high, and that was recent. So one of the things it had on there is days on the market is high. So
Yep.
what does that mean?
So when you list a place, that's day one. Now it's listed. It's out to the public. Everybody can see it. Every day that goes by counts as one day on the market in simplest terms. Back in the day, not very long ago, you couldn't get through 6 hours without having an agent call you going, "Hey, I'm going to send over an offer." List on Thursday night, start showings on Friday evening. I would have calls going, "How many offers do you have?" I mean, it's the saddest call. And I was the one calling agents as well. "How many offers are you looking at so far?" And so by Sunday, they would look at all the offers and hopefully make their decision Sunday evening. Nowadays, you list a place, just hang on. Discuss with your sellers that, hey, we're going to start at this price. This is what the comps are showing us. I'm confident, that was a relative term,
Yeah.
that we are going to get showings, we are going to get it sold, and it's all going to be in a reasonable amount of time. However, this is what the market's looking like. These are the other homes that are competing with your home. And this house has been on the market for 30 days. They've already done 3 price reductions, or 1, or none. And so days on the market is extremely important now. And if it's been on the market, every seller remembers the good old days of a weekend listing. And now, if as long as we're doing our job, we're managing expectations that it could be a while. And that's when you have the conversation with a seller. As a buyer's agent, I just look at the market, and it's like, if it's been on the market longer than 7 days, we have some motivated sellers.
Okay. I hear that phrase a lot, motivated
Without
sellers.
a doubt. If they're listing their house in this market, they want and must need to sell for whatever reason. They still want to upgrade. They're going to take advantage of the market because the market was so inflated, and they have a pretty nice home, lots of equity still. I mean, even if, just because we're talking about it's a down market, the equity of the homes, it's still up there, and a well priced move in ready home can still sell extremely fast. There's still buyers out there that want and need to move. So you just kind of look at all factors and look at what the competition is, and make your best offer based on those numbers. And again, working with an agent, they call the seller's agent, and the seller's agent will tell you everything you need to know without you even asking, because they're very excited just to get a phone call to have a conversation about their client's home.
Now, one thing I noticed, something that seems to come up a lot, is that there's like that one home that's higher priced than anything around there, and I don't see any kind of standout or luxury features. It looks like it was an emotional list. How do you basically, should that, what should the seller, or not the seller, I should say, what should the buyer look for is when they consider, is that overpriced because it's a higher price than similar properties? Or are they looking now for maybe it went on and off the market repeatedly? What are they looking for there?
So they're looking for a few things. One, again, it's the most expensive home in the neighborhood. The first step is, why do my buyers like the home so much? Why are they even pursuing it? And then you got to figure out, is there a problem with the house, or is it just overpriced based on the neighborhood? And when you get into that situation, you really just have to put your best foot forward and go, what is the house worth to you? And once we look at that, I mean, if the payments line up and all this lines up, and they make an offer and they give the seller close to what they want, well, now it was priced right. You know what I mean? And the seller was just willing to wait for that right buyer. And I've got 2 listings right now. We're not getting a ton of showings. It's new construction. We're not budging on the price. We feel it's priced right. And if a buyer wants the home, well, let's see what it's worth to you. We'll obviously take any offer with a real thought process of, this may be the only offer, and that's what an agent would do with their sellers. It's like, okay, we got an offer, this might be the last offer, and even if the seller's like, well, we'll get more, it's like, well, we haven't yet. So really treat this like it's your last, it's the offer. And you'd want to do that with any offer, not just this market, but that's how I pursue going over these things. And with my buyer, it's just really a matter of, what's it worth to you? Can you see yourself living in this home for at least 5 years for the market to come back in case you do buy it and it dips? So you got to keep that in mind.
And then and then just kind of wrapping up this topic, as far as, is it overpriced? One of the things I noticed that people try to do, and maybe this is just me watching too much $1 Million Listing, but houses tend to, it seems like the seller sometimes tries to manipulate the market by taking the house on and off the market several times to either reset the days on the market, or it's gone under contract a few times and the buyers have pulled out. Is that public knowledge, even if they try to do that?
Yes. And there's a couple things on that. One, if you see a house go off and back on, and you're really paying attention, or you've got an agent that's working with you, check to see if they switched agents, because that happens too. They're like, okay, we gave you 90 days. It's not working. And the agent's like, I'm doing everything I can. It's the home, it's the price, it's all these factors. So they relist. And if you don't see a price reduction, there's a few factors. Maybe they kind of started over with new photos, same price, new photos, different wording, and then just tried to revamp the property. Now, from a buyer's perspective, I get the listing, I email it to my buyers, they see it again, they're going to recognize it, it's going to look in a different light. And then they're just going to ask me, what happened to this one? How come you sent this to me again? And I'll be like, oh yeah, I sent that to you again now. Or hey, this is what they've done, and here it is again, just presented a little differently. So it's kind of like manipulating the system. Does it work? Anything is worth a try. Honestly. And so on a little like agent side note, if you just go into your listing, make any adjustments to the wording or anything, add a different photo, it's going to hit everybody's email again as a data change. So it's not the same thing as doing a full-on new listing, but it's going to show up again and it's going to create another viewing. So you don't necessarily have to get a new MLS number and all that other stuff.
Oh, well, that's cool. It seems like also I've noticed when sellers put things on and off the market, something's changed, either the marketing strategy or, they've maybe staged the house or they didn't before, or there's some kind of a change worth taking a look. And it seems like there's always a price reduction, or I should say a price change. So some kind of an adjustment to that.
Yeah. Normally, if you're going to go that far and get a new MLS number, you're going to do a pretty substantial price reduction, which is now we call it market correction.
Oh, market correction. I like that. Is that like pre-owned BMW?
Pretty much. Certified pre-owned, yep.
Instead of used.
Yes, correct. Right. And so when you do that, go in, get some new photos, do your market correction, make it relatively substantial, and then go ahead and try to remotivate the buyers out there. And staging that's another reason to do it, because the place is going to look completely different from what people have seen.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Ray. This has been a great episode, and I hope our listeners will appreciate these real estate tips and considerations before jumping into that purchase, and happy that you were able to join me today.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So that's all for us this week on My Home HQ podcast with Ray Fletcher. Join us next time when we bring you more topics on real estate, home buying, selling, investing, and more. Drop us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make it a great rest of your month, and thank you for listening to My Home HQ podcast with Ray Fletcher.
Thank you for listening to My Home HQ podcast with Ray Fletcher. Drop us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website and blog at www.rayfletcher.biz or contact Ray directly at realtorrayf@gmail.com to also subscribe to his weekly newsletter.